everybody. My name's Ray Carr. Welcome to another episode of Cold Red. With me always is Fitz. Fitz, how are you?
I'm doing okay tonight, Ray, and we'll talk why I'm only okay in a few minutes.
Absolutely. Before we get into that, I want to wish everybody a happy new year, as this is one of the first shows of the new year, in case we haven't said that before. But today we're happy to have with us Rachel Fischer. She's a special guest, and this is a special episode. Rachel is an author and an international sex trafficking expert. As a registered nurse, she's certified by the Commission for Forensic Nursing Certification through the International Association of Forensic Nurses in adult and adolescent sexual assault, as well as pediatric sexual assault. Rachel, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you. Before we get started, Jim, there's something that occurred today that Rachel, I want to get your input on this too, because you're somebody that's from outside of this, but today I heard 19 minutes before Biden left office, he put out a bunch of pardons. And one of those pardons was an individual by the name of Leonard Peltier. And for those people who haven't heard that, or you probably may have heard the name, Leonard Peltier was convicted and spent almost 50 years in prison for the killing. I shouldn't say the killing. It was more of an execution of 2 FBI agents in South Dakota in 1975. I'm beside myself. I can't believe this has happened. Although I didn't know either of those agents, I'm very, very hurt by the disrespect that the president showed the FBI in general. Jim?
Yeah, and let me add, Peltier was convicted, and I think there was 23 appeals on his case. There's been all these allegations of mistrial or misconduct at the trial, and prosecutors did this, fabricated that. All of those have been dismissed, thrown out. Every appeal filed by his attorneys, he stayed in prison. The only time he got out of prison is when he escaped. Only a couple years after he was first put there. He was on the lam for a while. Fortunately, he was captured and put back in prison. Yeah, it was Ronald Williams and Jack Caller, 2 FBI agents that were killed and basically executed, as you said, 1975, looking for a fugitive on one of the Indian reservations. Very sad story. All these years, it's amazing all the Hollywood celebrities and various politicians who kind of, went to bat for Peltier when he's a cold-blooded killer. They even disfigured the bodies of the agents after the fact. It's a very sad chapter, and there'll be video of this guy. I'm sure he'll be wheeled out of the prison to make it look like he's truly suffering, because part of the pardon was that his, some kind of health concerns. But unfortunately, Jack and Ronald are still in boxes 6 feet under, and they're never getting out of those boxes except, in the afterlife. But Peltier gets to live his last few years on Earth. So the Agents Association is very upset. They wrote a letter, or at least a tweet. They're outraged, and I know the new administration has expressed outrage. I just wanted to let Ray, we talked a little bit before, you and I would be remiss if we didn't at least bring this up, share that outrage. And this was so predictable. I was online 4 years ago when this president was making some moves, and I said, folks, the most dangerous time in this country's history, in a few different ways, but certainly coming to pardons and commutations, will be his last month in office. I have emails. I said that 4 years ago. Ray, I think we said that on Cold Red, and sure enough, it's all come to pass. So that's not what tonight's episode's about. We have a very important guest we want to get into. And Rachel, I'll throw it to you. You're an outsider, but I know you work with law enforcement. I'm not sure how you see something like this, but any 2 cents you'd like to offer, be our guest.
Yeah, it definitely sends the wrong message about consequences of violence against law enforcement. It's been a problem in our country, and we weren't sitting in the jury. We weren't there for the evidence, so we can't speak on what was or wasn't shown in that. But the jury did their job. They made their decision, and I value juries. I value our criminal justice system. And when they sit through all of that and the gruesome, evidence that they had to see, they made their decision. And for years later, for somebody to undermine the role of our criminal justice system and those jurors who did their duty, and you undermine them, and then you send the wrong message for people who commit violence against law enforcement.
It's law enforcement sees a lot of bad things, but you know what? So do nurses. That's why I always had a special place in my heart for nurses, because if I ever got hurt, guess who's going to take care of me? It's going to be a nurse. That's the first person that's going to come to my rescue and help me. And all cops know that. And I don't know. I mean, all cops said I could never write a ticket to a nurse because that's who I would have to depend on if something ever happened to me. But that's the whole thing. And then, I look at you and, and I see what you do and some of the things that you do. And I'm like, wow, what a special person you are to be able to do the things that you do. And you do it hand in hand with law enforcement. How perfect is that? I would love to hear how you get started in all this.
Yeah, so I've been an ER nurse since 2011, and I've also been a forensic nurse. So working firsthand in the ER, you see a lot of trauma, you see it all. Law enforcement, EMS, firefighters, they come in often. As a forensic nurse, that's another arm of nursing that not a lot of people know about. That's where the legal system and medical intersect. And so law enforcement will bring in patients who have been victimized either through sexual assault, trafficked, gunshot wounds, assault. They'll bring them in and we'll do the forensic evidence collection in the ER or in the clinic, and we'll collect that evidence, give it to law enforcement. They take it to the crime lab, and then we'll testify as experts in court on behalf of the victims of violence. And it's a niche portion of nursing, but it's definitely needed. It's tough, especially when you're dealing with the kids. And I'm a pediatric specialist, so I see all the bad things that happen to kids.
One of the things that I know you're seeing more and more of is a term that we're hearing more and more of. It's called human trafficking. A lot of our audience and a lot of our fans, just so they have a clear understanding, what really is human trafficking? What does that mean?
Yeah, so it's a word we see. It's a buzzword. People see it, at the airports. If you're a victim of human trafficking, call this number. And you hear about it a lot. There's movies coming out. There's legislation coming out. And January is actually Human Trafficking Prevention Month. It's since 2010. It's actually been 16 years that now we're in January, Human Trafficking Prevention Month. Yet we still have a problem. And still there's so much awareness that needs to be had. And the prevention of it is critical. That's why they want to educate. But human trafficking is commonly mistaken for smuggling or border crimes. And smuggling is a crime against a nation, getting people across illegally. It does overlap with human trafficking, labor trafficking, sex trafficking, but it's modern day slavery. It's utilizing somebody's body either for labor or for sex and somebody else benefiting from that. It's different than, the sex work that's talked about or prostitution. When somebody takes somebody and prostitutes them, or somebody's prostituted, it's something that's being done to them, then you get into human trafficking because there's somebody else making money off of the sale of another using force, fraud, or coercion. And sometimes they make it seem fair when it's really not, but it's vulnerabilities that are targeted with the victims. And not a lot of people understand that, here in America, we see international and domestic, but it's predominantly domestic. And we see a lot of our kids, our teenagers that are being trafficked, and it's happening in our schools. It's happening rural, big city areas. And it's a big problem. It's modern day slavery, and it's happening everywhere. Multi-billion-dollar industry.
If I can add a little historical perspective back to forensic nursing, I'm not sure if they're still around, but there used to be a group, at least in Pennsylvania when I was a police officer, Women Organized Against Rape. And they were very well, in fact, organized. And whenever we would have a rape victim, an adult woman, a child, we would call them and they would sit in the interview with us. And they were very valuable. We did the interview of the victim, but they would be there for support, whatever. And then we would go take the victim to the hospital. Sometimes it'll be right away. And that's when I first met for the first time some forensic nurses. And I think a lot of the forensic nurses involve themselves in, sexual assault and the rape kits that, they would have at the hospitals, and they could do everything. Sometimes we'd have them come into the police station in the early days. So there's a lot that was back in the 70s, early 80s. And I know it's come a long way since then. I trained, I've gone to a few training blocks with forensic nurses, try to teach them, what I knew about sexual assault. And of course, I learned from them too. So you came in 2011 or so, Rachel, but I know there's some people well before you, and you're picking up a lot from where they left off. So good for you there. I also remember working in New York as an FBI agent, and every year we'd have a couple kidnappings. And there's virtually no for-profit kidnappings. Give me $1 million and I'll give you your little daughter back. That doesn't happen much at all anymore. But there would be a lot of people from international concerns who would sneak people into the country, and they basically have them as indentured servants. And they would keep them, and they have to work for 2 to 3 years in the bowels of some laundry somewhere or some restaurant 7 days a week. And essentially they were human trafficked into the country illegally. And the only way they would be fed and maintained and then eventually gotten some fake papers or something was by this form of human trafficking. So I actually worked cases like that in my New York days and some days later or some years later as a profiler indirectly. So again, I appreciate the little, basic definition of what it is and who it affects. And it's worldwide now, right, Rachel? It's not any one third world country or some other countries that, we think have problems. It's right here in the U.S., correct?
It's here. I've been international in different operations and doing documentaries in different countries and then back to America. It happens everywhere, but nobody is excluded from being, a victim potentially. They target vulnerabilities, not just people. And the, average age is about 14 years old that we're seeing here. We're seeing a lot in schools. But the labor trafficking, sex trafficking, there is overlap, but we see a lot of massage parlors that is adults predominantly, but they're being forced to do labor and sex practices. And sometimes they will have a real visa. They'll get their papers, but they're not in the greatest living conditions. And they don't know that they have another choice. And they fear law enforcement in our country. And, there's a lot of turmoil with, people understanding what law enforcement does, working alongside law enforcement, because I'm not an arm of law enforcement. I didn't go to police academy. I've worked with law enforcement on several cases, but just that partnership of there's advocates, like you said, having somebody with advocates that are utilized. We work as a multidisciplinary team. So there's prosecutors, there's forensic nurses, law enforcement advocates working together to get best victim outcomes and to hold offenders accountable is really critical. And us understanding what y'all do as, in the FBI agents, the Leos that are on the streets, we need to understand your role so we can better do ours. And that collaborative effort is critical, especially in these cases. We need everyone at the table to work together and to understand each other and not blame each other when the cases go south, but just to do the best we can on each one and to actually take a stance against it so it doesn't continue to happen because it's prevalent and parents don't even know that their kids are involved. The kids don't even know that they're involved because they don't know that human trafficking means human trafficking. You see the definition and in the airports, it's great. We're getting a lot of the buzzword. It's coming out there. But if a victim doesn't know that they're being human trafficked, they're not going to respond to that flyer and call the number, nor do they usually have control of their own phones. So if you changed it and said, are you tired of working and not getting paid the correct wages and sleeping on the floor? Are you tired of having sex for money and not even being able to keep it and having to give your money to someone else? Well, that's trafficking. Give us a call and we'll help you. But nobody wants to say those words. We're afraid it's taboo. Nobody wants to talk about it.
When you're coming in contact with some of these victims, Rachel, two questions. Number one, what are you seeing as the average age? And number two, what are the vulnerabilities that lead or the vulnerabilities or factors that lead to vulnerability with these victims?
Yeah. So vulnerabilities could be anything from a single family home and, they live with their mom, but they want a man in their life. So the little girls have daddy issues and they cling to the first person who pops up on social media and says, hey, I'll take care of you. I'll take you to the mall. I'll take you shopping. I'll put you through college. Just go work and I'll keep your money for you. They believe these promises. They're groomed. Grooming is a huge part of it. There's a lot of familial trafficking that goes on. A lot of the foster care pipeline, kids in foster care will end up in it as runaways. And really, they're missing children, but they're talked about as delinquent youth. But teenagers are predominantly, we see a lot of the high school juniors and seniors that are pimping out the freshmen and the junior hires. And they don't think they're being pimped or that they're being trafficked. They just think they're, in the game, they're in the life. They're making money moves, as they call it, in the media. And it's all over, music and it's glorified as being cool. But no little girl ever grew up and said, I want to go sell my body for sex and give my money to someone else. No, they wanted to be lawyers and doctors and ballerinas, but they were groomed into this, coerced lifestyle, making something fair seeming that isn't. And the vulnerabilities are what they target. So they'll come in, they'll watch their social media accounts and they'll come in and tell them that they're at the local school. They'll use FaceApp. They'll use all the technology and AI, and they'll truly make them believe that they're, in love with this person or that they have a relationship. And really, you've got somebody in the basement next door and he's chatting with your daughter and you have no idea, just coming in through the gaming apps and the online world. And that's really what's exposed our kids and our teenagers to being trafficked is social media and online platforms.
Well,
Rachel, has the open border in the last 4 years contributed to this also, either
It
as
has.
victims or as offenders?
Yes, yes. So I'm in Texas now. I was originally in Detroit. So in Detroit, we had the Canadian border. So we had a lot there coming across from Windsor, Sarnia. But here in Texas, we're very close to the border. So that's what makes Houston a hub. We've got our international airports, the border proximity. And a lot of the victims that I've worked with, they've come across with, a coyote. They've paid somebody to come across illegally. And then because of that, they got sexually assaulted. They got sold to another family. They had to be a nanny or forced labor or just have sex with the workers. And that's their payment for, but what is it? That's sexual assault. That's domestic violence. It's human trafficking, money being made from somebody else. But we've seen it a lot. And a lot of we have murders that have been committed. They'll rape them. They'll kill them. Just some gruesome things. And if you can't find them or they're not here, they're just not, they can only be prosecuted if we find them, and they just keep getting away with it. And you'll hear the stories of these little girls that, they came across and this person helped them get across. So they had to live with them, but then, they had to call him Uncle Jose, and, Uncle Jose plays with me every night. But since we're living with him and they got us across and their family's here, we have to keep their secret. And these little kids, they just don't get it. I'm little kids that are getting abused. It's just that vulnerability. They have no place else to go. What are they going to do? Are they going to turn in this person? And then these kids are like, well, I didn't want to say anything until now because he said he'd get deported if I said anything. And I really like playing with his daughter, and I don't want my best friend to go away, so I can't tell on him. These are the stories these little kids are saying. They're so afraid. And, their parents are telling them, don't say anything. We need a place to live. Don't tell. And then we find out, oh, mom just allowed that to happen to her little girl because they needed a place to stay.
You mentioned social media and some of the other gaming platforms and some of those things. How or what, if what's the best way for parents to protect their children?
So when you give your kids access to the online world through a tablet, the internet, a cell phone, you're giving the online world access to your kids. And with the growth of technology, it's not just outdoors snatching your kids up at the mall and taking your kids. They're taking them through social media online. It's games. They'll come in through various games, various social media platforms, through calculator vault apps where these kids are typing in numbers and going into chat rooms. You see 4 calculators on your kids' phones. They're probably not going to be a financial advisor someday. Those are hidden vaults. So they don't need to have storage. So go into the storage. Why is there 30 megabytes of storage in the calculator? There's so many hidden ways, and these kids know. I mean, 8-year-olds, they're getting on here. They're into pornography sites, and parents, they're like, well, I guess the best part is to just take the phone away. That's what we're supposed to do. No, don't take their phone away. That's not the answer, because then you lost trackability. So when the kid does go missing, I can tell you how many kids that we've gone to go find, and we don't have a location for them because the parents are like, well, I have their phone right here. That doesn't help us. The reason that they're gone, so you took their phone away, grounded them from it. The trafficker came in, pretended to be a boyfriend online, and now he got your address, said, I'll drop you off a new cell phone. Just tell me where you live. Now they've got a new phone. They're being tracked by that person, and you can take their phone away all day or try to safeguard what they do, but they're going to find a way to do it. So what you have to do is educate your kids. We have to talk to the kids about what is out there, the reality of it. Parents don't want their kids to hear it, and that's why it's hard to get the education into schools, because the teachers, the parents, they don't want little kids talking about sex. But the elementary schools are full of it. I do the exams, the forensic exams on these kids in so many schools, hundreds and hundreds of these exams, and they all have similar stories. But the parents, if you don't educate them in the forefront and tell them, this is what you're going to see, this is what's out there. When I give you this magical tablet, this is what you need to be prepared for. That's what you need to be doing on the offense, is educating the kids, because that's predominantly who's being trafficked, and they're being targeted and groomed. So if you're on the defense and they're already having these conversations, you find their phone, you go into the game, and you realize that they're talking to an adult or somebody that they weren't supposed to be, then they're going to be defensive because they've already got that relationship built with that person. And they have this trauma bonding and that Stockholm syndrome, and they're trying to protect that person because they don't think they're being abused. They think it's somebody they care about, that Romeo and Juliet pimping. So you have to educate them because they're going to learn it. And it's better that you do it on the offensive rather than being on the defense and telling them what they just did is wrong.
So as a forensic nurse, go ahead, Jim. Now, as a forensic nurse, go
this
ahead,
happens
Jim.
every once in a while, Rachel. It doesn't matter.
It does.
So I'm always looking at things in a historical perspective, and I'm thinking about how mostly men, between Boy Scout leaders, Catholic priests back in the day, it was more interpersonal before social media, and they would sometimes meet the parents, and they'd be kind of grooming. They would look for a single family household, or I should say a single parent household, and work on that family, and without social media, et cetera. And they're grooming them mostly for themselves. But I think nowadays, I know there's some of that still going on, but I think nowadays we also have international entities or conglomerates involved and organized crime, and not only abusing the young girls and young boys too, putting them out for prostitution as such, but also in that dark web of child pornography, they're no doubt getting them involved in that too. So what can you tell our audience and us about sort of the umbrella element of this whole problem? It's not just individuals locally going out. There are also large-scale organizations running this. How much do you know about that?
There are, in the cross-border, that's when you get into, trafficking across borders, you get into federal. Here at the state side, if we have local law enforcement that bring it to the district attorney's office, it's going to look different in the criminal justice system than if you've got a federal trial. And holding the offenders accountable is what's ultimately going to, end it if you want to stop it. And so my heart beats for the demand. So trafficking is supply and demand. The victims, the people who are being bought and sold, and it's males and females, that's the supply. The demand is the people who want sex, who they want to force people to have labor. They want to make money off of somebody else. That's the demand. The traffickers, the pimps, the agents, as they'll call them, the traffickers, those are the ones who are facilitating that. They're the ones who are funding, your local level pimps to be able to drive a nice car to seduce and lure the girls in. And sometimes they'll have a high rise and it's high dollar escorts. And the demand is these men coming in, because it's predominantly men, could be female buyers too. But when you look at the supply and demand, the supply is typically young kids, predominantly females, but males too. And the demand is the men's coming in. They're coming in for major sporting events. They're coming in for conferences. And they go online, they go to an escort site thinking, oh, it's 18 and over, but they know what they're looking for. They request pigtails and they request flannel skirts. And the demand is the guys who want to pay for sex. And if we could stop the demand and get them to stop paying for it, get them to stop ordering child pornography, then we're going to get somewhere. We can go recover 10, 15 girls in a hotel operation tonight. That's great. They're safe. They're back home. That's one thing. But if we don't stop the people who took them and put them out there, then we're just going to have a repeat. They're going to go out and get more. There's a saying in life, we don't chase them, we replace them. So if we don't stop the demand and get men to stop paying for sex, I would hope that 100 men that paid for sex last night, if they knew the story of that little girl, how she got there, or why she's working in the strip club, I would hope that at least half of them wouldn't do it. But they just don't know, because people think that they just want to be there. But most of them don't have a choice. And the ones that don't have a choice, or if it's their only option, is it their choice? So that's what we have to look at, is that supply and demand curve of how do we stop the demand for it and how do we hold them accountable? And that comes that criminal justice process is, when you're offending, holding them accountable for it. We made a sex buying is a felony here in Texas now. So if you pay for sex, it's going to be a felony.
And they should be named. They used to name the prostitutes they arrested, but never the Johns. And I think that changed in some cities and states. They should be named. Innocent until proven guilty. We all agree with that. But if they're arrested, it's public information. And no doubt there's organized crime involved in this, international cartels, perhaps regular organized crime in the U.S. and other cities too. And I'm sure I know Interpol throughout Europe and the rest of the world is involved. It's the International Police Association. I'm sure you may have had some dealings with those. So yeah, this is a real problem. It's not going away anytime soon. And again, thanks for what you're doing in this.
It's because it's so lucrative, right? Where there's money, there'll be blood. And with cocaine, you can sell that one time, it's gone. With a girl, you can sell a victim of trafficking 10 times, 20 times in a day, make a lot of money, and then continue to reuse her. And that's what's happening is they're being forced out there. They're being forced to use drugs, and then they're just called a drug addict. And then they turn that magical number of 18 and nobody cares about them because now they're a prostitute. Even that word, I don't even like the word prostitute because they're in prostitution or they're being prostituted. It's not their identity. It's not who they are. Even, people who are in sex work and they say that they want to be there and they're adults, they're not prostitutes. That's a very vulgar term. We need to, change our language surrounding that. And even the pornography, the child sex abuse images, these are kids that are being groomed to send us a photo, send us a video, and then they're using that, uploading those to porn sites where normal people in all these different countries and all over America log on, download their porn, and they don't know that it's a little girl that just got forced to do this, or that boy just got filmed and forced and threatened that his little brother would be next if he didn't let him take that video. So they don't understand the story of what's behind the screen. And I've worked with lots of pornography survivors and human trafficking survivors from all over the world. And the stories are horrible. And in Detroit, like I was in the foster care system. I lived it. I went through it. And so I've seen it from both sides. And so I speak from lived experience and from being out in the streets, and also from what I do now, going back in the streets and working with law enforcement and showing them how the criminal organizations operate and what to look for and how to build rapport with the victims, because they don't want to talk. They're not going to talk to law enforcement. They're going to fight you. They're going to spit on you. They're going to kick and scream, and they're going to show loyalty to their trafficker because they think they're going to catch a case. And so it's building that rapport, letting them know that you're there for them, that you're not just there to arrest them, because we can't arrest our way out of this problem. We can't prosecute our way out of this problem, but we need to listen to the victims. We need to say, not what is wrong with you, but what happened to you? Tell me what you need. What are you running to, or what are you running from? What's their why? What got them there? And that's what we need to focus on.
That's a really good point, Rachel. Part of my career in the Bureau was working crimes against children. And a lot of that was dealing in child pornography. And every time a photo of a child is taken, no matter how innocent it is, if it's used as either a form of child erotica or something else, the child's being victimized. And you're right, where there's money, there's blood. It's almost $1 billion industry in child pornography. People don't understand how lucrative it is. And when these kids come in and you talk about we need to change the word prostitution, well, that may be difficult because it was back in biblical times when they called them prostitutes. So it's been around a long time. But I agree, we need to soften something. We need to do something to be able to turn the tables in our favor. But you as a forensic nurse, you mentioned the fact that you went into schools and for the pediatric side, and you're interviewing these kids and the horror stories you're hearing. Was that your main role as a forensic nurse, or are you in the hospitals as well?
So I'm in the hospitals as well. So I've done thousands of SATE exams, which is a sexual assault nurse examiner. It's a sexual assault evidence collection kit. They're trying to get away from the term rape kit, but it is commonly referred to as that. And everybody looks at TV and they think, oh, it comes back within a day. You just take the rape kit and we find out what happened. But it takes months. The crime labs are behind, and it takes months, sometimes years, for that kit to be processed, which is why the victims sometimes recant or they don't want to go through trial, because it's a long, drawn-out process. And the healing process from being victimized is a long one. And with kids, disclosure is a process. And they're sometimes so afraid that they did something wrong that they hide the secret until later. And then they're afraid they're not going to be believed. And then we get delayed outcries. Defense will say, well, it must not be true because she didn't say it then. But these kids are scared, especially if it's familial or it's happening in their foster home. They just don't want to go to another foster home. These kids have been moved around to different homes. And when the abuse is happening at the home, like that was in my case, when I was in the foster system, it wasn't a safe home. They took me from a bad situation, put me into a worse one. And I was a runaway at 15. And I learned by the streets. But that's commonly what we see with these kids. And so when I'm hearing these stories, elementary schools, junior high, and I always go around the room and I ask them, how many of y'all have a cell phone? They raise their hands. How many of you have a second cell phone that your parents don't know about? And half of them will raise their hands. Parents have no idea these kids have a couple phones, and they're cutting the back of the mattress and hiding it in there. And they've got several Finstagram accounts, and parents will monitor one phone, but they've got another. These kids are smart. We have to be smarter than them. We have to learn the technology they're using. You have to look at their developmental stages and what little kids want and what high schoolers want. And they want to be popular and they want to be cool. So you've got somebody's like, hey, come drive around in my Bentley and I'll take you and get you a Coach purse, but take this pill and come with me to this party. And then they're driving a cool car, having nice shoes and a nice purse. They take a pill, they go unconscious. And then they're being sold for $100, $500 to each person, and it's being filmed. And then that gets put on a pornography site, and then somebody else over there is clicking and paying and clicking and paying and going on these sites to continue to pay to watch this horror. That's the reality. That's what's going on with sex trafficking. And that's what's happening to these kids. And the kids sometimes don't even remember what happened, but then they get addicted to these substances and they need more. And so they're like, hey, we'll give you some more. We'll give you another bump. Just come over, take this. And then they go through it all over again. So the kids don't always even understand what all is happening to them. But now they got a cool pair of shoes. They're getting picked up. They're more popular in school, but they're being exploited.
You mentioned about maybe parents not taking the phones from the children. What do you think about what Australia has recently enacted? And that is anyone under 16 years of age is, at least in the books on paper, by law, not permitted on social media. Do you feel that's at least a step in the right direction, at least in that country, or not?
So, and I was just recently over there and talking to some people on this issue. In America, we have laws on how old you have to be to get in some sites, but they can just get a new IP. They can get a Proton Mail account. They can just change it, right? And so what verification is there? And with fake IDs and with AI, there's no real way to stop it and prevent it or deter it, because they're just going to get smarter than the system. And so you've got 12-year-olds who are on TikTok, 8-year-olds on TikTok, and they're not even old enough to be on TikTok, right? But they surpass that. They go around that and they find a workaround. Legislation is critical. We definitely need to work on our laws, and we're doing that a lot here. Even the Take It Down Act that just passed in the Senate. If you have child sex abuse images online and you find them, whatever social platform they were on should be forced to take them down when asked. But if they're not forced to, and if there's no law enacting that, then they're just going to have them up there, even though they were proved to be criminal. And that's something we're fighting right now. So it's little things like that you don't even think of. It should be common sense. If you find a little kid online and in a porn site, take it down. So it's those simple things. That's why legislation is critical, and having teeth in those laws.
You've been doing this as a nurse, as a professional for 14 years, but you've been involved in it probably your whole life, or you've been seeing it anyways. When you work closely with law enforcement and you're involved in quite a few cases, I'm interested to know what's that one case, and you're still young as far as I'm concerned, but what's that one case that's going to stick with you for the rest of your career?
Part of me would say they all stick with you. And then the other part of me says, I don't want any of them to stick with me. In order to survive and to continue to do this, because I've seen a lot. Like, I've looked at autopsy photos, I've testified in trials, and you can only hear the same story over and over so many times. And each story matters. And I've heard thousands of these stories.
So true.
And you got to treat each one, I can't take it home with me, because that is how I survive as a person, is I have to compartmentalize. And I can't be an advocate for my patients when they're in trial, right? I have to be that medical professional, because I have that medical exemption to hearsay. So I diagnose and treat my patients. I can testify for them in court and read their statements out loud. So I can't be an advocate. So I do my portion in that. When I'm a private investigator and I'm in that role, it's very different. But each case, for all law enforcement out there, everybody who's in this fight, it's a very difficult one. It's a dark, dark reality, and we're in it every day. So we have to be able to do self-care and be able to not take it home with us, because looking back at things I missed, or things, as this continues to grow and we learn new ways around it, we can't look back and say, I missed that. You have to say, I learned this, and now what? So you can't look back at your failures. You have to learn from them and say, because of this, I'm going to continue to learn and grow and educate. So that's why I do a lot of training to law enforcement on how they can better investigate, how they can talk to victims and suspects, because a lot of times the defendants are actually victims. So I do work with criminal defense attorneys as well, especially for the homicides where they kill their abuser, or they kill their trafficker, or they're being strangled and they kill the John that's on top of them, and now they're being prosecuted as a criminal. So I speak for these victims, because our criminal justice system is set up to play its role, but it's a judicial system. We have to fight for justice, and that means finding the truth and being fair, and finding out the stories. And it's not my job to say somebody's guilty or innocent, or that they did or didn't commit it. I listen to the stories, I collect the evidence. When I look at a crime scene, I take out the forensics and I split it apart. And you just have to look at each case individually and learn from each one, and being able to see that, we all work together, and we can't fault each other for the failures, but we have to know that we're all fighting the same battle, and we have to check in on each other, because it can weigh on you. There's a lot of burnout. Burnout is real. Secondary trauma is real. Vicarious trauma is real. But we all have our why that we do this. And we have to think back on that and why we're still fighting, because it can get daunting. And then when, they get a charge dismissed or they get clemency or they get let out, we did all that work. We put our lives on the line. We went undercover. We were in danger, and you're just going to let them go. And so that's the hardest part for me, is when I feel like justice didn't happen. And sometimes there's street justice and, the streets handle themselves. We just have to continue making sure that we do every day what we can do. And you can't save everyone, but everyone that you do, you can. And we're not there to rescue. We're there to provide a light in a dark place. And especially when they're adults, we don't just go in and rescue them. They have autonomy. They have a choice. And there's reasons that they don't just leave, because they can't just leave. And with the kids, we have to be a voice for them and build them up to give them their voice back.
I have to be honest with you here. I worked in crimes against children for probably 4 years. And then I was on the CART team, which is the Child Abduction Response Team. In working the crimes against children, I only lasted 4 years. And it was someone else's turn. It was the hardest work I was ever involved in. So I get what you're saying. And I'm telling you what you said, and there's no truer words spoken, being able to compartmentalize. And I think all cops do that, because we can't take home what we see, because we got families. We're trying to raise our families. So I get what you're saying, but very true and very well stated in reference to that question. Thanks, Rachel. It makes a lot of sense. And I think what you said is going to help a lot of people out there that are working cases just like this.
Hopefully, especially with our fires. You got the fires in California and all the disasters that have happened, the floods. We've seen it with Harvey. Anytime there's a major disaster, it creates vulnerability. And right now, California, all the people without homes, they're in very vulnerable situations. They're going to go into survival mode. And as time gets longer, with them not having a place to go or any hope in sight, people are going to be forced to make decisions, rash decisions. Predatory practices are going to come to them. They're going to be in a very vulnerable state of having to go live with family members that they haven't seen since they were kids. They're going to move in with Uncle Joey, and we know what he did to me when I was a kid, but I'm going to have to bring my kids to stay with them. And now their kids are going to be a part of that cycle. And that's going to be a numerous amount of people who are in bad situations and vulnerable and taking, a job that they're going to be a nanny and being forced to do labor just to have a place to stay. And everybody's situation is different, but we're going to see a lot of that, especially after this disaster. So we have to be mindful of that and, what your kids are doing online and what decisions you as adults are making because of the situation you're in. There's so many organizations that can help. So we have to be aware of that this is a big deal and people are going to be looking for housing and for somebody to be their savior.
Yeah, I hear you.
I certainly hope.
Go ahead, Jim.
I certainly hope the FBI, under new leadership, really starting today or tomorrow, they get back to the basics and not worrying about some of the minor stuff we've seen over the years, even politically oriented the last 4 years. And they really get back into certainly violent crime, but certainly crimes against children. That was whole legislation that was passed, Ray, I think in the 1980s, where the feds, the FBI, could in fact investigate sexual exploitation of children, SCOC for short. And I remember working with a task force in New York City, FBI agents, NYPD, and they would actively go out and try to rescue the kids, whether they wanted to be rescued or not, but certainly put the Johns or the offenders, arrest them, put them behind bars. I was involved in some undercover, like phone calls they would do, record them. And one NYPD detective, he was great at portraying someone interested in children sexually, and he'd have these phone calls, and you could see him, he just hated what he was saying, but he would play along with these guys, and he'd actually get these guys to admit on a phone call, legally recorded, that they, violated this kid, that kid. And then next thing you know, knocking on his door, making an arrest. So there's an art to it, part science, working these kind of cases, interviewing these young children. Ray and I may have our own specific skill set, talking to bank robbers and adult drug dealers, whatever. Young kids, you have to approach a whole lot differently. And Rachel, you really laid that out well with us so far. But there are people we knew in the FBI. That was their specialty. Like there was a woman, I think she worked for some police agency, and the FBI recruited her, and they actually hired her. And she'd go around the country interviewing young children who are victims of some kind of crimes, and usually sexually oriented. And she did a great job. And Rachel, I'm sure you're training people to go out and do that kind of work now, because it is definitely an art to sit down with an 8, 10, 12-year-old and try and get information out of them that they think may be detrimental to themselves because they've been so well groomed by the people putting them in this situation. Remember, their heads are mush. We're coming at them like full adults, but their brains, like all of our brains, up until, perhaps late teens even, is just not designed to fully comprehend the world in which we live. Some learn earlier than others to survive. So yeah, it's a real art, if not part science, in getting these young children to react. So yeah, all the things you've talked about, legislation, you're not going to stop these guys with these fetishes, these paraphilias that just somehow are fascinated by looking at pictures of young kids, transporting them, doing things with young kids, and they have to be arrested and taken off the streets too. And I started this little segment. I hope the new FBI really refocuses its personnel away from some admin stuff and gets back into the streets and starts taking down these kind of bad guys, the offenders in the hotel room with these kids, the groomers, but also the cartels that are running these operations. And it's never going to go away completely. We know that, but we can certainly put a dent in it and let people know they're going to go to jail and knock it out with a slap on the wrist under the new FBI.
Rach, we have some questions here from our audience that came in that Matt McLaughlin sent over to us. And one of the questions was, why January? Why January? And although it is January, it's January 20th, as a matter of fact. Why is January Human Trafficking Awareness Month? And why the color blue? If you know.
Yeah. So President Obama, back in 2010, enacted that. So it was Modern Day Slavery Awareness and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. So since then, every January, that's, we acknowledge it. But my thing is, it's not just the day we wear blue, or, you've got April and you've got Sexual Assault Awareness Month and, wearing purple, and everybody's got their color and their awareness. And the goal is to bring that awareness and to have that month to highlight. And I'm glad we do, so that we can focus on prevention. But that's only 1 month. And I get frustrated because every January, all these organizations want me to come train them. And so I think I'm home maybe 4 days total in January because I'm traveling around the country educating, because it's Human Trafficking Prevention Month. And since 2010, it has been. And now it's the 16th year of this, and it's still January. But why don't you want training throughout the year? Because it happens all year round, happens every day. So we can't just get focused on the fact that it's only this month. This is the month that we're putting forward. We're going to educate, we're going to try to prevent, but we also need to prosecute and protect and put those elements in there. Hopefully we start getting more people that are aware and get that education out. And that's kind of what January is supposed to do. And, everybody wears blue and comes into support and puts everything on social media and gets that out there. But we need to, it's not just if you see something, say something. It's if you see something, do something. And now that you know something, what are you going to do about it in your own communities?
Great. Another question. Now, you kind of already answered this, so I'm going to add to it. It says, what can we do? How do we collectively stop this? I want to ask and add to that, because I think it's important in answering that question, which you kind of already answered. But what are the things that you think or you wish people better understood about human trafficking?
That it does happen here, that it isn't just like on, Taken, they throw a bag over their head, take them into the truck. It's not like that. Does that happen? Sure. Yes, it does. I've had those cases, but it's every day. It's them going to school and talking to somebody who makes them promises and gives them something to believe in. It's somebody with a dad who's very wealthy and they've got everything in their life paid for, but their dad is gone working all the time. So the girl now has daddy issues and wants to find someone who pays her attention, who says, I'll come to your soccer game, I'll take you shopping. So it looks different than what, the word is. It's human trafficking is a big academic term, but it's our kids. It's here. It's in America. It's in your school, your kids. If you have kids, they're exposed to it. So the biggest thing is educate them, get education in your community, bring it to your church, because we see it a lot. In faith-based, and they're infiltrating the churches. They're going into youth groups. There's female recruiters as well. So they'll send girls in that are, the female traffickers, and they'll recruit them in the form of just a new girlfriend. And then all of a sudden your kids have new friends from different schools and their behavior starts changing. So we're seeing that a lot. So just educating your kids, educating your communities, and stopping the demand, stop paying for it. Stop fueling that demand and get help. Go get therapy if you need it. There's so many organizations. Google nonprofits for stopping sex trafficking in your city, and you're going to find it. Stop going to the massage parlors for happy endings. You got to stop the demand. Bringing that education, supporting survivors, giving them jobs, giving them real life jobs that they can do and make money. Because if they've got criminal charges for prostitution and nobody will hire them because they've got a felony now, it makes it very tough. What are they going to do? Go right back to all they think they can do. We got to give them options. We got to stop the cycle.
When you look at the overall statistics, if you had to look based upon your experience, what regions do you think have the highest percentage of trafficking? Where are most people trafficked to and from?
So there's what we call the circuit. Any major city where the demand is, where there's large amounts of men, where there's events going on, these girls get moved around the circuit. Because when police get hot on an area, they just take those girls, move them to New York, take them from New York to San Francisco, take them to Atlanta. Any major city, the girls are getting moved around because we are starting to put out more efforts in finding them. These kids are getting moved and their names are getting changed and their appearances are getting changed. So it's very difficult, and a lot of it is posted online, but it's everywhere. It's in rural towns. It's in small towns, big towns. It can be a big crime organization, or it could just be another kid or another girl in another school that says, hey, social media said this is a cool way to make money. Let's go do it. Let's make some trap money and buy a 911. It's Hollywood and theatrics, and it's made to be okay in our modern culture. You know, even pimps and hoes, Halloween parties, themes. I mean, if we really understood what that meant, somebody pimping somebody and being violent and forcing somebody to do something they don't want to do, that's not cool. That shouldn't be celebrated. So stop celebrating it. Learn about what it actually means.
Does this happen just to women or is it men as well?
Males and females. Labor trafficking is predominantly more males than females, but the numbers of sex trafficking has been predominantly more females than males, but it does happen.
If you had the opportunity right now to take one of these individuals being abused and sit down with them, what might you tell them?
Well, I talk to at least one every day. I've got survivor networks from all over the country and people who are still in the life, people who are still pimp controlled that reach out to me. I do my check-ins. And I always tell the ones who are still in the game, hey, there's a way out. I'm here when you need me. If you're an adult, do your thing. You got a kid with them now. You've got ties. We're there to help you when you're ready. But if you're a kid, your voice can be heard. We just need to know what you need. So it's telling them and letting them know they're not going to be in trouble, that they didn't do something wrong, but that somebody is wronging them. And so taking that elephant out of the room and saying, we're not here to get you in trouble. We're a safe place, and being that safe place. As a parent, don't make them feel like they're in trouble. Just be a safe place for them to come to. So when they are, targeted online, somebody pops up in their DMs, they feel safe to talk to you. So be a safe place for victims and for survivors to come talk to you about what they need so you can help.
You know, Ray, what's coming up in about 3 weeks is the Super Bowl in New Orleans. And Rachel, you mentioned, the big events, and you mentioned even the Super Bowl specifically. So we're about 3 weeks out, give or take, from that event. And it sounds like from everything you said, and Ray and I are familiar with this, but probably you more so with current numbers, that's going to be a real hornet's nest of activity and human trafficking. And I certainly hope the law enforcement there will try to be preventing a lot of bad things from happening, explosions and other types of deadly mass situations. But I hope they're also taking a look at these, these are violent crimes. They're just, hopefully people don't die at the scene from them, but these young women are being abused, and it eventually leads them into a life of violence, no ands if or buts. So I hope those people planning for the Super Bowl are talking to people in your line of business, if not you yourself, about what's the best way to prevent the availability of these young girls, keep them away, arrest whoever has to be arrested, and prevent it to begin with, but certainly to not let anyone get away with it if it happens there. So I hope the Super Bowl people who are running the show, the NFL, law enforcement, FBI, somehow have this message too, and know to keep a real strong eye out for this. And I'd like to see him bring down a cartel or an organized gang or two of the people doing this. Let's hope.
Rach, I'd like you to share with our audience, I don't want to pump your head up too big so you can't get out the room tonight, but you were in a documentary on Netflix. Tell our audience a little bit about that, because I think I've seen it, and I don't want to steal anything from you, but I think if they watch that, they're going to come away with a lot more knowledge. I did, and I worked those cases. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's called Surviving Sex Trafficking, and you can watch it online, Surviving Sex Trafficking film. But we went to Budapest, Ethiopia, we went to Manila, the Philippines, and Mumbai, India, and Vegas, and Miami, Houston. And we listened to the survivors. We went and we looked at what does trafficking look like over here? How is it happening? Labor and sex trafficking. And we put together this documentary that talks about the survivors' journey of how they got into it, how they were exploited, and then the healing journey that happens after. So what they need to do to be normal again or to feel like they could heal. And so the documentary is a really great tool to watch and educate yourself, educate your kids, but also to bring into your community. And some people will have a movie night and they'll show it and they'll see the realities of what does that look like here domestically compared to internationally. And you'll see the similarities. You'll see how people are, taken to different places and they travel across the country when they're being exploited. So I think it's a really great way to inform yourself and to hear from survivors. Because if you're at a crime scene, the best person to solve that crime scene is the person who committed the crime. Now, the person who is living in the life of exploitation, talk to them, listen to them. The survivors who lived it, being able to watch a film where they talk about how it happened and what goes on in the life and what you can do about it, that's where you learn and you can actually have actionable intel and steps to do something about it.
The other thing is if you're going on a trip, I think a great book to read would be a book written by Rachel called Taking Back the Pen. Rachel, where can our listeners get a copy of that book?
It's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon? Remember, Taking Back the Pen. Jim?
No, this was a very educational segment. Again, I touched as a profiler and an investigator, touched on these crimes. I interviewed young girls as a police officer whose parents or other people were sexually assaulting them. I didn't do it full time, and maybe that was, for me, a healthy thing. I know the old sex crimes units, I'm using air quotes here, they call them special victims units now, but those officers, detectives, 2 years, 3 years at most. Ray, you said after 4 years. I knew you back then, and it was a tough time. Mm-hmm. They're tough cases to work, especially if you have your own kids. You're looking at them, and then you're dealing with other kids while you're at work, and it's just sometimes tough to deal with. But I thank you for all that you're doing, and I encourage others to check out the Surviving Sex Trafficking as well as Taking Back the Pen. Learn more about this. Get involved at the local level. And I know I think most cities have some sort of organization to do with, stopping this kind of human trafficking. Folks, if you're listening out there, look it up online, not hard to do. And you may get some bad emails coming in or some bad sites sent your way, because I'm sure the algorithms are out there about what you're looking for. But look for the good guys trying to prevent this stuff. And again, Rachel, I have no further questions, but thank you for your time. Ray, any final words before I take us out?
Yeah, I want to say one more thing to Rach. Rachel, throughout my career, I met a few angels on earth, and you're one of them. I met another one tonight. I don't get a chance to meet many of them. So thanks for your work, and thanks for what you do. You're a special person. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ditto here, Rachel. No ands, if or buts about that. Folks, we told you how to get in touch with Rachel and what she's doing. Thanks again for listening to this episode of Cold Red. Please subscribe to us, like us on all the regular sites. Check us out on coldredpodcast.com. Thanks to Matt McLaughlin, Matt Robinson, our producers, Rick Schilling, our music coordinator, and everyone. Again, Rachel Fischer, thank you. Ray, have a great night, and we will talk again soon, everyone. See you later. Stay safe.